Hello everybody, I am MandyMod and I am back with another speed build at long last. So first of all, I have to apologize. It's been such a long time since I've posted. I mean, not like forever. It hasn't been like a year or something really absurd, but it's been at least a month, and honestly, it's just because I've been busy with life and I haven't even had time to even open The Sims, let alone like make the whole build and make the film and everything for my speed builds. It's been kind of depressing actually that I haven't been able to play, but you know, life calls, it just kind of happens. But either way, I am back now, at least with this one for now. So this was really fun to make. And so what I'm returning with is actually another speed build from Disney, from Peter Pan. This is actually Peter Pan's hideout, called Hangman's Tree, actually, in the lore in the film. So Hangman's Tree is kind of creepy when you think about it. It's actually, it's this really, really big dead tree in the middle of a clearing on a hill. So you will notice that I am making sure to make that hill before putting the tree in, because I wanted to make sure it actually did come up off the ground if you were to put this in your game and make like a hill at it. But Hangman's Tree is exactly what it sounds like. It is a tree with a noose in it, and that is where people have been hanged, supposedly. I don't know all of the lore behind it. All I know is that that is kind of a morbid thing for something like Peter Pan to have, but whatever, right? That's where his hideout is. It's actually underground. So you'll notice that most of the top of this build ends up looking kind of boring just because it is a tree. A very large tree, I have to say. I used a bunch of those big dead trees from the Supernatural expansion pack and kind of combined them to make this really thick trunked tree. I didn't actually have a noose or anything like that, even my custom content that I could make like actually hang from one of the branches. So that's just going to have to be inferred. Or maybe Peter Pan and his Lost Boys took it down. I mean, however you really want to play it. But otherwise, the entirety of this build is underground, like I said. It is a basement, and it is fully functioning and pretty fun, actually. Because, like, I don't know, it was interesting to make, because in the film, or at least I'm referencing the Disney film, I actually was inspired to do several different things throughout the build that I will talk about by other Peter Pan renditions. Specifically, there's a live-action version of Peter Pan from my childhood that I like adored. I don't even know. I don't even know if the actors went on to do anything with their lives or anything like that. But that version of Peter Pan, it's like live-action, not Hook. Hook has what's his name? Oh my gosh. Also did Genie, Robin Williams. So yeah, Robin Williams was like adult Peter Pan in a movie called Hook, and it's not that one. There's another live-action version of Peter Pan that's legitimately amazing, and I think it holds up even today, and it's the best version of Peter Pan. And if you find that, you should definitely go watch that one, because that is like my favorite. But there are a couple scenes from that film, from that live-action version, that inspired this, along with the animated version. Because the animated version does not give you a lot, like at all a lot. There are only a couple little scenes of Hangman's Tree hideout in the animated version of Peter Pan, and all of those scenes are very nondescript. For instance, almost all of the interior that you see is very tight, very cluttered, and most of that clutter is like Indian stuff, probably because of the Indian scene that they have before the Lost Boys get to the hideout in the film. Like the sequence of the movie, I don't know if they actually keep all that like Indian drums and like pattern stuff like actually in the hideout. But in the movie, I actually rewatched it just so I could refresh my memory. The Lost Boys have their encounter with the Indian encampment, and they sing their song and dance their very anti-Semitic dance, to put it lightly, and then they all go back to Hangman's Tree, and that's the first time we actually see the hideout. So I don't know if all that Indian stuff is actually like in the hideout permanently, or if it was just that they brought it back from their like happy times dancing with the Indians, Chief and Tiger Lily. But because I didn't really have a lot of that kind of cultural stuff already in my custom content, I just kind of improvised and left most of that out, unfortunately. So a lot of this is actually pretty, I winged a lot of this. Like even right now, if you notice that kind of brown ground is supposed to be like dirt, even though I think like the actual texture is like leather or something. So I use like a mixture of stone and pebbles and that leathery dirt texture for the flooring throughout, because in all of my reference and all of the film that you see, the floor is basically dirt and the walls are dirt and there's tree roots going up and down the walls. It's almost like the Lost Boys literally dug a hole out underneath Hangman's tree, and that's where they made their life. So in The Sims, of course, we can't do that. We can't even really round out walls. I think there might have been custom content somewhere that like can round out a corner pretty well, but I didn't really have that. I think that's also like a medieval thing. It's not going to be terribly naturalistic. So I kind of avoided all that and made this a super, super wood and stone and dirt textured themed underground, I don't know, underground hideout. So what you can see me doing right now, actually, is where I'm trying to figure out what to do with the walls, because there's so much space that I wasn't really sure what to do with it all, and it just kind of ends up looking cluttered. So, or not cluttered, like repetitive is what it ends up looking like. So I ended up like varying up some of the wall textures. I used a hell of a lot of the textures, or wall paneling and stuff from... There's a series of wall panelings and floors from a Castaway series. I forget who makes it, but they're like one of my go-to kind of nice wood paneling for like run-down builds. So I use that here. That's what almost all the walls and floors come from, are from that Castaway series. So it all kind of ends up looking very natural and very cool. Like there's like the one wall at the very back of Peter Pan's room is actually like the texture on it is like, what's it called? Animal skins is what it looks like when you look up close at it. It's really neat. It's a really good set. I hope that the textures will be included in the CC pack. Again, I'm not really sure if I can check that, but yeah, should be there and it should be cool for other people to download, I mean. But yeah, so right now, obviously, you can see that all I've really done is build the inside and texture it. Now, one thing that I did end up accidentally doing, I didn't really mean, everything ended up kind of, all the other rooms except for the main room underground turned out to be way too big than I wanted them to be. So as you see me build, you'll notice that I will reduce the size of a lot of those rooms. The only one that stays the same is that main octagonal room. Is it octagonal? I don't know, it might be, is it hexagonal? Because no, it's octagonal, it's got 8 walls. I got this. And the other thing that I thought was kind of cool, I added that fireplace there. It came with like a medieval set that I've recently like downloaded. And like when I was testing it out just to make sure that my sim could actually get everywhere, like it was cool because I made like the chimney coming out of like the ground basically. So it's like the little plumes of smoke are puffing out from underneath like this like rocky shrubbery formation, and it looks kind of neat, you know? It's like, oh look, there's a secret down there. So yeah, so what I'm adding in right now actually is Peter Pan's throne. Now, which seems kind of conceited, I guess. Well, I mean, Peter Pan is pretty full of himself when you think of him as a character, but I mean, you don't really associate him with a throne. But in the film, there actually is a distinct chair that he sits in that has like a big bear skin on it, and it does look like a pretty mighty chair. So, if there's going to be a throne, I figured there might as well be one in this main room. And like, even if he doesn't actually use it to quote-unquote rule over the Lost Boys, it's like he uses it like a play chair almost. So that would be what this throne is for, and I spend quite a bit of time here actually just making it like kind of look grand, because I wasn't really sure what to do with it. You'll also notice that I took out and gathered all of my animal skin stuff from, I think that it's like from Skyrim packs and stuff like that, because I wanted to make sure that I got a bunch of those rugs down, because I needed to make sure the flooring was broken up, because otherwise it gets so busy just to look at as far as a viewer like you and me are concerned. So those rugs are a great thing to have throughout this build. You'll notice that the rooms just look better and better the more stuff I add to them. The other thing is that, like a lot of my other kind of like apocalypse builds, you'll see a whole bunch of candles, like more candles than you can safely probably have at a place like this. Like, honestly, it's a surprise that the Lost Boys haven't burned themselves to death. with all the candles that are in this build. Yeah, and also things are pretty run down. I made sure to choose like the worn patterns of woods and like the dirtier looking stuff. And there's a whole bunch of clutter and there's toys everywhere. Like, it gets pretty intense when it comes to this whole build because, again, you have to think about it. It's basically like a teenager. I think Peter Pan is supposed to be like 13 or something like that. So it's like he was about to grow up and he didn't. And then the Lost Boys are all kids, of course. So, like, all these rough and tumble boys are living in this underground playhouse, and I can imagine it's not going to be very cleanly. I can't speak today. So, I mean, when you think of it like that, it felt kind of appropriate just to make everything kind of look as worn down and old and dirty as possible. Except, of course, for actually what I'm working on right now, is Tinkerbell's corner. So, Tinkerbell, of course, does live with Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. She's like Peter Pan's main companion, and everybody loves Tinkerbell. So, if she's a fairy, though, I didn't want to, like, build her a room, even though it's like The Sims. So, instead, I made her one of those little tree house things that the fairies can actually go in, sleep inside of, which I thought was a really cute idea, and then just surrounded that whole little treehouse thing with nature. So it really does look like a little fairy, like, grotto thing that she can go sleep in. So that's, like, Tinkerbell's little house, and that's where she lives. So I actually really enjoyed that. It was kind of like this cute little splash of nature in, like, a sea of brown and grays. And I did try to incorporate different shades of, like, green, just to contrast all that brown. It does get kind of overwhelming at times. But yeah, Tinkerbell, oh my goodness. Oh, as far as like playing this in The Sims, like, I mean, of course you can't have a family of children. Like, The Sims will not allow you to have a family of children, right? Like, you know that, we all do, unfortunately. Unless, like, you have parents and you kill them off. So what I kind of imagined that if you wanted to actually play this lot in The Sims and try to make it as realistic as possible, what I would personally do, and of course you can do whatever the heck you want, right? But what I would do is make an adult fairy sim, and that would be Tinkerbell. So she's the fairy, and she'd be the adult that's technically like the guardian of these kids in Sims terms, though of course not really. And then Peter Pan, I would make a teenager, and then all the Lost Boys would be children. And that would be that. And of course, Wendy would be a teenager, and her brothers John and Michael would be children. But I thought that would be like a cool way to like mediate the age gaps for the characters, so that, because I feel like it would be so wrong to make Peter Pan like an actual, even a young adult. Like, he's not supposed to be an adult. He doesn't grow up ever. That's the whole point of Peter Pan. So like, if you make him an adult in Sims term, it would just turn me the wrong way. I wouldn't like it, you know? So yeah, I made sure, like, that's kind of my thoughts on how I would play this personally, as far as if I were playing like a whole Peter Pan world or a storyline. So that's kind of cool. The other thing that I have going on is in that main room. You may have noticed me putting down, I have a plethora of custom content, and one of the things that I actually got were these training dummies. I think they're from Skyrim, technically. From Murphy. I've used her stuff several times before. But the training dummies are actually just a mesh overlay of the World Adventures training dummy. So like that thing there where they can train on. So I thought it might look like a, you know, a very masculine area where like the boys maybe will go and beat on these training dummies just for fun, because they're all play fighting and they play as pirates and stuff. And I later go back in and I put in a couple costume chests and toy chests, and so amongst all the other clutter that you can't use, there's a bunch of like playful items throughout this build that the boys are supposedly, like, you know, involved with. Because yeah, the Lost Boys, they're pretty cool. I was thinking about it. I'm not sure exactly how many there are, because I don't think you can technically have a full family with all the characters living in this lot at the same time, unless there was like some sort of cheat. Because, like, you'd have Peter Pan and Tinkerbell, obviously, so that's 2. And then, if you really wanted to play the story, Wendy and John and Michael would join, and that's already 5. So you'd really only have room for 3 Lost Boys. And I'm pretty sure there's at least 5 of them, because there are, like, little twins. There's the chubby guy, the bear suit chubby kid. There's a little skunk kid who is adorable. I loved him when I was growing up. I thought he was the cutest little kid. And I think there's at least a rabbit and maybe a fox. So like that's like 5 or 6 lost boys. I admit that I don't know their actual names. Like I think the chubby one is called like Cubs or something like that. But so forgive me that I don't know all the lost boys. The fact that I can name most of their animal costumes is doing pretty well for me. But actually what I'm working on right now, if I go back to the build briefly, is Peter Pan's master suite room. So you'll notice that there really aren't any doors, like actual physical doors in this build, only arches with like curtains covering them. Because I wanted to make sure that things were open. Like I said, the Lost Boys, it looks like they did actually like dig out this hole under the ground. So I don't think they would have the fortitude to put in like actual holes and stuff, right? So, like Peter Pan's door is an archway, and in the film that was one of the other few things that we actually see, is that there's a room that he retreats behind that has like a big bear skin hanging over the entrance, and he like swoops it because he's mad at Wendy or something. So I made sure to hang a skin up in front of the archway. I don't know that your skin actually can walk through. That's right, I did test it. It doesn't cover up the entire entryway, but it looks good enough to pass for it. The other thing that I wanted to mention right here that I'm doing, I'm putting a present right there next to the throne, because if you remember, that's actually part of the main storyline for Peter Pan, is that when Wendy leaves Peter and takes all the Lost Boys with her, and they're subsequently captured by Captain Hook, Captain Hook actually leaves a present that he addresses from Wendy to Peter, and it's like the bomb that's going to kill Peter. So that little white present that I stuck there is actually the present from Wendy to Peter. So that's that reference right there. So you did notice that I did put in Peter Pan's room, which is like the only big legitimate throne room, because again, he's Peter Pan. He's basically the Prince of Neverland. So he deserved his own like large room. The other thing that I'm adding now, this other separate bedroom, is actually going to be Wendy's room. So technically, I don't know, like maybe the Lost Boys like would fight over this bed occasionally, or I don't even know if they did have a guest, or maybe Tiger Lily actually came to stay or something. This would be like a little guest room, but a lot of clutter ends up in here. It's not really used, but I imagined this being where Wendy would sleep if you actually did like a Sims playthrough. You'll also notice that briefly I worked on the room next door to Wendy's room. Is one of the only real bathrooms. Peter has his own bathroom connected to his master bedroom, but the bathroom actually has these rock formations inside of it, and that's another piece of custom content that I am in love with, that I use quite a lot. And that custom content is an outdoor shower kind of thing. It is a shower that is basically just rocks. So your sim goes in there and water falls out like a little waterfall. It's supposed to look like a naturalistic shower, so you don't have to have like plumbing in a naturalistic build like this, for instance. So yeah, the shower room is very basic, and again, I wouldn't imagine that the Lost Boys are very concerned with taking too many showers. Honestly, they probably are just covered in dirt most of the time anyway. So I wasn't really all that concerned about bathroom privileges and times. I mean, if you wanted to add another bathroom, you totally could. It's a basement. There's definitely room for adding an extra bathroom, especially on the lower floor. But otherwise, you'll notice that this is Wendy's room, and it has a few extra papers. It actually has a nice little bookshelf in there, which I was very sparse with because I considered that Peter Pan and the Lost Boys probably don't enjoy reading very much. Like, that might sound a little judgmental, but hey, I mean, they're pretty active kids. I wouldn't imagine that they're very much into, like, the arts or, like, the higher learning kind of hobbies. Like I wouldn't have put a piano in this build anywhere near by far. So the only, like, bookshelf is kind of a rough bookshelf, and it's in Wendy's room, and I would imagine that it's very disused. Also, Wendy is a storyteller, remember, so if she is going to tell a story to the children, she might pull a book off the shelf. You never know, right? So, and then we go down to this lower level here, which again is nowhere in the animated film, but I kind of made this whole room like referenced off of the live action Peter Pan that I mentioned before. Because in that, I have a distinct memory that Peter Pan sits with the Lost Boys in this very like warm, earthy room with candles all over the table, and that's where they have like a dinner, and there's like a confrontation with Wendy and stuff like that that happens in that scene. But anyway, yeah, so I made sure that in this little area there's a little kitchen, which again, the boys don't really cook, it's just there because what Sims build can't have a kitchen, right? And then I include this uber long dining table, and that's where Peter and the Lost Boys have their feasts. And like again, like Peter's chair at the end of this table ends up being very grand. He definitely has the kingly spot amongst the Lost Boys. He's their leader. Otherwise, I mean, I tried to give the table as an eclectic look as possible. I used a variety of different kinds of seating, rudimentary seating, nothing is very regal. Again, because like the Lost Boys just kind of collect everything. You'll also notice that I do make these rooms significantly smaller as I keep on working here. Because, yeah, like I said, I wanted things to feel more homey and kind of cramped almost. Because again, this is like an underground burrow. I wouldn't imagine that they would have like a huge place to live down here, even though it is actually pretty big. But I think all the things that I added to it, added to the entire hideout, makes it feel a little bit more closed in. So, and especially like once you get like 8 Sims running around here, I'm sure it'll feel as crowded as ever. But yeah, so otherwise you'll notice here I'm putting down all those rugs again, making things feel nice and cozy. I do like a nice like little backsplash thing going on here on this back wall behind Peter's chair. Figured I could make him feel a little bit more like regal that way, because if you look down the table then you'll see Peter in like his back area. And also covering that table with those candles, again, that was totally influenced by that Peter Pan live action film. I really love that theme in general, actually, not just in Peter Pan, but like in other kind of magical builds. I like the idea of like taking candles and like just letting them burn out so the wax kind of piles up and you just keep putting candles back on top of that same spot. And like it creates like this nice like drippy wax effect that's just really pretty. I've always considered it, like I said, very magical, like very witchy and stuff. Like I love that idea. The other thing, like I didn't include like any laundry in this build. I mean, you might have to, because things are bound to get pretty gnarly from having a whole bunch of little boys running around. Especially poor Wendy. Like Wendy's like the mom, because yeah, she's hired to be the mom. I see. Recruited to be the mother of this sad treehouse. Like, poor thing. I mean, she tells stories and everything, but like as a mom, she'd probably end up hating it because all she'd do is like clean up after these rowdy boys, right? But yeah, so at this point, I'm kind of running out of things to talk about. The next room that I do work on as far as the build is concerned is that last room that you can see as I'm working around the dining table. I mean, at this point, I'm just cluttering up the dining and kitchen area. But that's pretty normal. If you know me, you know how much I love to collect clutter around my builds. Especially, I have so much food and kitchen clutter, it's like almost embarrassing. And there are a couple places, I think in like one corner, I put like some gold coins just sitting there. I thought it was kind of a funny idea because like to Peter and the Lost Boys, like they don't care about treasure at all. It's like not their thing. They just care about finding treasure. I think that's in the second movie with Wendy's daughter, Jane. Like they just spend all the time looking for treasure, but they don't actually use gold for anything. It's Captain Hook and, you know, adults that care about money. So I did put a couple like gold things here or around in the corners and stuff of this build because we, like the Lost Boys, don't really care about money. But otherwise, yeah, this is the last room that I'm going to work on in this entire thing. It is the Lost Boys room. And yeah, it just has it obviously has a bunch of bunk beds. I will recolor those here in a second. So the Lost Boys just kind of pile on in here. Again, they're very, what's the word? Like, they don't really care about having boundaries up. I feel like little kids really don't have they don't really care about having their own space as much, especially if you've grown up like that. Because, I mean, if you remember, or unless, I guess in case you don't know at all, but the Lost Boys, like the lore, I think, behind them is that they actually all are all are orphans. Like, Peter was an orphan that was saved by fairies, or saved by Tinkerbell and the other fairies, and that's what happened to him, I think. And, the Lost Boys are all orphans, too, that Peter Pan has recruited because they didn't have anywhere else to go. So they don't have a mom or a dad or anything. They've actually lived in an orphanage. So it kind of makes sense that the Lost Boys wouldn't have their own room. They would just pile on top of each other and sleep when they're tired and then get up and go play more. After all, it's Neverland. They never have to worry about growing up, right? So I did have some fun with this kid's room. I made some things like pretty, again, very cluttered. There's lots of toys, like little kids' toys too. Again, I wasn't really sure what to put in here because I didn't want to put like, again, canvas or something for painting because I get the feeling that the Lost Boys would not be huge on painting. So this just kind of ends up being a nice kids' room with a bunch of bunk beds so that they can all just crash when the night's over. So that was kind of fun. And again, some very, very light lighting going on, candles and such, and toys. Lots and lots of toys. But otherwise, this build is pretty much done at this point. So yeah, so the whole build is going to include Peter's room, his suite with his bathroom, an extra guest bedroom, which is quote-unquote Wendy's bedroom, a shared bathroom, the boys' room, kitchen dining room combo, and this big living area upstairs. It's the main room, of course. You'll also notice that there were a couple different entrances to this build through the one tunnel because I wanted to make sure like the boys could like sneak in underground anywhere. But yeah, so now we're actually on to the screenshots. I hope you enjoyed this build, and I'm sorry I kept you guys waiting for so long. I really didn't mean to, and I hope it won't happen again. I can't promise anything because, you know, like I said, life gets to you and you have things to do, and so, like everybody does. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with how Hangman's tree turned out. So yeah, anyway, let me know what you think. I always love to hear your comments. And until next time, I'm MandyMod. Have a magical day. Bye!